The arrival at the refuge. The summer heat filled the air as Jack and Emily parked their car in front of the newly purchased property. The small retreat in rural West Virginia seemed like the perfect escape from the chaos of the city and a serene spot to spend a peaceful vacation with their family. The house was simple but charming, surrounded by trees that swayed gently in the breeze, and the field around it seemed endless. "Welcome to paradise," Jack joked as he carried the luggage up to the wooden porch. Emily smiled, though something about the silence of the place made her uneasy. The realtor mentioned something about an old mine at the back of the property. Jack commented casually as he explored the yard. Emily frowned. "A mine? I thought this was just farmland." At the back of the property, there was a slope with signs of old excavation. Surrounded by weeds and uneven rocks, the entrance to the mine was partially blocked by aged, rusty boards. Jack approached to take a look, but a sudden gust of wind made him step back. The metallic smell emanating from within was unsettling. "I think it's been abandoned for centuries," he murmured, returning to the house without mentioning the unease he had felt. The first night passed without incident. The couple enjoyed the tranquility, preparing the house for the arrival of relatives in the coming days. Emily cleaned the kitchen, while Jack checked the surrounding area with a flashlight. He noticed that the field seemed darker than it should, as if the moonlight couldn't illuminate certain parts. In the early hours of the morning, Emily was awakened by a distant sound. It was low and continuous, like something scratching the ground. She opened the bedroom window, but the field's silence was absolute. When she returned to bed, she realized that Jack was also awake. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Emily nodded, but neither of them dared to investigate. The warning tremor. The next morning, the couple began organizing the yard, planning a space to host their family. While Jack cleared fallen branches, Emily discovered an unusual trail of footprints near the mine's entrance. They looked human but were far too large, with deep claw-like marks along the edges. "Jack, I think you should see this," she called out, holding up her phone to take a picture. Jack approached and examined the marks. "It's probably an animal. Maybe a bear," he said, trying to sound casual, though he knew something felt off. "Bears don't leave tracks like these," Emily responded, clearly concerned. But before they could discuss it further, the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. It was a short tremor, but enough to make the wind stop and leaves fall from the trees. Emily clutched Jack's arm. "Was that an earthquake?" Jack glanced around, uneasy. "Maybe, or just some ground shifting. These areas have old caves, remember?" He tried to sound convincing, but deep down, he knew the tremor had come from within the mine. That night, the unease lingered. As they ate dinner, Emily noticed something strange on the horizon. Small points of light flickered in the field, close to the mine's entrance. "Jack, what is that?" she asked, pointing. Jack grabbed his flashlight to investigate. When he shone the light across the field, the flickering lights vanished as if they had never been there. The first encounter. Later that night, as they tried to sleep, the sound returned. This time it was louder, like rocks rolling and wood being dragged. Jack got up and looked out the window. A long, irregular shadow stood near the mine. He blinked, and the shadow was gone. "We should leave," Emily whispered softly, but Jack hesitated. "It's just our imagination," he insisted, though he didn't believe his own words. The next day, Jack and Emily decided to investigate the mine while the sun was still high. Armed with a flashlight and a shovel, they removed part of the boards blocking the entrance. A cold wind rushed out of the opening, carrying the smell of iron and rotting flesh. Emily stepped back immediately. "This is a bad sign, Jack." Jack stepped in cautiously, illuminating the interior. The walls were covered in scratches, as though something had clawed at the rock. Pieces of wood and old bones were scattered across the ground. Further inside, A tunnel spiraled downward, disappearing into darkness. "We shouldn't go any further," Emily said, tugging on Jack's arm. "We need to seal this now." As they argued, a deep sound emerged from within the tunnel. It was a low growl, almost human but guttural. Jack turned off the flashlight and grabbed Emily's hand. "Let's go home. Now." That night, the couple was on high alert. Jack reinforced the windows and doors while Emily organized lanterns and batteries. "Whatever it is, it shouldn't come out." "Not during the day," Jack said, trying to reassure her. But as the sun began to set, a high-pitched scream tore through the air, echoing across the field. When they looked out the window, they saw dark shapes crawling out of the mine. They moved erratically, like animals that had forgotten how to walk. Their deformed bodies reflected the moonlight, revealing oversized claws and grotesque teeth. Emily began to cry softly. "They're coming." The siege begins. Jack turned off the house lights as Emily secured the remaining doors and windows. "If we stay in the dark, maybe they won't find us," Jack suggested, trying to stay calm. But Emily knew the creatures were already aware of their presence. Heavy footsteps and scratching along the house's walls soon confirmed her worst fears. From the edge of the curtain, Emily caught a close look at one of the creatures. It was horrifying. Its skin appeared stretched over broken bones, as though it had been molded by suffering. It had no eyes, but its head turned, listening intently to the sounds around it. When Jack accidentally knocked over a flashlight, the creature abruptly turned, letting out a shriek that made the air vibrate. "They hear everything," Emily whispered, pulling Jack away from the window. The couple retreated to the kitchen, trying to remain silent, but the creatures were closing in. The sound of splintering would echo through the house as one of them attempted to force open the back door. Jack ran to the backyard shed while Emily distracted the creatures with a beam of light from the living room window. In the shed, Jack found an old generator and a can of gasoline. He hurried back and connected the generator to the house's exterior lights. When the lights flickered on, the effect was immediate. The creatures let out blood-curdling screams and retreated into the shadows. "The light keeps them away," Jack shouted, but the relief was short-lived. The generator was old and began to sputter, making choking noises every few minutes. Emily watched the creatures now gathering around the darkened areas. They seemed to be planning, patiently waiting for the lights to fail. "Jack, this won't last," she shouted, her voice trembling with panic. The resistance. With the generator on the verge of shutting down, Jack and Emily began improvising. They positioned lanterns by the windows and used pieces of furniture to reinforce the doors. Emily remembered an emergency kit in the basement that included flares. She rushed to retrieve them while Jack worked to stabilize the generator. While Emily searched the basement, she heard a noise that made her freeze, a scratching sound coming from inside the house. "Jack," she called, but her voice was swallowed by the growing noise. When she pointed her flashlight at the corner of the basement, she saw something that made her scream. One of the creatures was there, crawling along the floor as if it had found another way in. Emily fired a flare directly at the creature, causing it to recoil with a deafening screech before vanishing into the darkness. She ran up the stairs, her heart pounding, and found Jack bracing the kitchen door against another creature trying to break through. "There are too many," he shouted, his arms trembling from the effort. Emily handed him one of the flares and lit another. The bright, burning light forced the creatures to retreat temporarily, but now they were everywhere, surrounding the house and probing for vulnerabilities. "We can't stay here," Emily said, nearly out of breath. "We need to leave before they completely trap us." Jack nodded, knowing the path to the car would be dangerous. "Grab everything you can carry. We'll run to the car and use the headlights to keep them at bay." Emily began gathering lanterns, batteries, and flares, while Jack grabbed the car keys and a hunting knife. the dash across the field. With everything ready, Jack and Emily slowly opened the front door, using the light from the flares to push back the creatures. The field ahead was filled with shifting shadows, but the car was only a few yards away. "Stay close to me," Jack said, gripping Emily's hand tightly. The two of them sprinted toward the car as the creatures screamed, enraged by the light. One lunged forward, but Jack swung the flare at it, forcing it to retreat. When they reached the car, Jack unlocked the doors and helped Emily climb in. He started the engine, and the headlights illuminated the field. The creatures, blinded by the intense light, began retreating toward the mine. But as Jack sped away from the property, Emily glanced at the rearview mirror and saw something horrifying. More of them were emerging from the mine, like an endless wave. "They're spreading," she cried, grabbing Jack's arm. They drove at high speed toward the main road, the sound of the tires echoing through the stillness of the night. When they finally stopped at a brightly lit gas station, both were gasping for breath, struggling to process what had just happened. "We can't just leave," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "What if they reach the town?" Jack looked at her, battling the panic building inside him. "We need help. We need to warn someone before it's too late." The call for help. The gas station was an oasis of light amidst the oppressive darkness. Jack parked the car near the entrance, and Emily hurried out, still clutching one of the flares. The attendant, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, looked at them curiously. "You two okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily tried to explain quickly. "There's something coming from the mine behind our house. Creatures, dozens of them. They're coming out and could attack anyone nearby." The man furrowed his brow, clearly skeptical. "Creatures? In the mine? Look, lady, those stories about the mine have been floating around forever, but no one's ever seen anything real." Jack stepped forward, his irritation evident. "I saw them with my own eyes. These things aren't human. They kill, they hide in the dark, and they'll attack anyone in their way." He placed his hands on the counter, forcing the attendant to meet his gaze. "You need to call someone. The police, the National Guard, anyone." Reluctantly, the attendant picked up the phone. While he called the local sheriff's office, Jack and Emily stared out the gas station window at the deserted road. The lights flickered faintly, and the wind carried an oppressive silence. Emily clutched Jack's arm. "What if they come here?" When the attendant returned, his face was pale. "The police said they'd send someone, but it might take a while. They said tremors near the mine aren't unusual, and there haven't been any reports of anything dangerous." Jack shook his head in frustration. "They won't believe us until it's too late." The return to the property. As they waited at the gas station, Jack had a dangerous idea. "We need to go back to the site. Seal the mine for good. If those things keep getting out, no one will be safe." Emily's eyes widened. "Go back? Are you insane? We barely got away." Jack held her hands tightly. "I know, but if we don't do something, they'll spread. We have to block the entrance, use whatever tools we have left, and try to keep them trapped." Emily hesitated, but knew he was right. If they didn't act, the creatures could reach the town in just a few hours. With the headlights on and their flares ready, the couple drove back to the property. When they arrived, the scene was even more terrifying than before. The creatures were scattered across the field, moving erratically. Some lingered near the house, while others gathered around the mine, as if waiting for something. Jack positioned the car so its headlights illuminated the mine's entrance. He and Emily got out, each holding a flashlight and a flare. "Let's make this quick," Jack said, carrying a bag of rocks and tools toward the mine. As Jack worked to reinforce the barricade, Emily kept watch. The creatures stayed away from the light, but let out eerie screams that echoed through the darkness, making the tension unbearable. Suddenly, Emily froze as she spotted something. One of the creatures, larger than the others, stood just at the edge of the light, watching. "Jack," she whispered, pointing. "I think they have a leader." The alpha creature. The larger creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. Its form was even more grotesque than the others. Long, muscular arms, twisted legs, and a jaw that seemed ready to split in two. It let out a deep, resonant scream, prompting the other creatures to begin advancing cautiously, testing the edges of the light. Jack worked faster, throwing stones and wood into the mine's entrance. "Just a few more minutes, Emily. I'm almost done." But the alpha seemed to understand what they were trying to do. With a deafening roar, it charged forward, ignoring the light, and the others followed close behind. Emily lit another flare and threw it at the creature. The bright flames forced the smaller creatures to retreat, but the alpha only hesitated for a moment before continuing its relentless advance. "Jack, it's not stopping," Emily shouted, her hands trembling as she held another flare. Jack finally threw the last stone into the mine's entrance and grabbed a shovel to reinforce the blockade. "It's done. Now let's get out of here." He ran toward the car with Emily, but before they could reach it, the alpha lunged at them. Emily swung the flare toward it, forcing the creature to recoil momentarily, but it managed to grab Jack by the leg, dragging him to the ground. "Emily, get to the car," he yelled, kicking at the creature as he struggled to break free. Panicked, Emily ran to the car, but instead of fleeing, she grabbed one of their strongest flashlights and aimed it directly at the alpha's face. The intense beam of light made the alpha release Jack, retreating with a howl of pain. Jack crawled to the car, and Emily helped him inside. "Hit the gas, Jack," she screamed as he started the engine and sped away from the field. The counterattack. The car sped down the dirt road as Jack and Emily tried to catch their breath. Jack gripped the wheel tightly, blood dripping from a deep gash in his leg. Emily pressed a cloth against the wound to stem the bleeding, but her eyes were locked on the rearview mirror. "Are they following us?" Jack glanced at the mirror and saw nothing but darkness. "I don't see any of them, but that doesn't mean they've given up." The winding road jarred the car with every bump, but they both knew they couldn't afford to stop. When they finally reached the main road, Jack slowed down. The comforting illusion of safety offered by the streetlights brought a brief reprieve, but neither of them could relax. Emily looked at Jack, her hands still trembling. "We need to go back with more light. More weapons. We didn't finish the job." Jack pulled over to the side of the road and took a deep breath. "You're right. Blocking the mine entrance wasn't enough. That thing, the alpha, it'll find a way out. We need something stronger." Emily opened the glove box and found a detailed map of the area. Her eyes locked onto a spot nearby, a construction supply depot. "Here, we can get dynamite or explosives there. If we can't block the entrance, we'll blow the whole mine." Jack hesitated. What if those things escape before we can finish? We don't know how many are still inside. Emily stared at him with steely resolve. "Then we have to be fast. It's our only chance." The search for explosives. Driving down the deserted road, the couple reached the depot just before midnight. The place was closed, but the fence wasn't very tall, and Jack knew they couldn't waste any time. They parked the car in a hidden spot and climbed over the fence, Emily clutching a flashlight tightly. The depot was a maze of crates, rusty tools, and fuel barrels. Jack found a box marked explosives and quickly opened it, revealing sticks of dynamite and a roll of fuse. "This should do," he said, while Emily grabbed a few cans of gasoline to reinforce the plan. But then, a familiar sound echoed through the area, the high-pitched screech of the creatures. Emily instantly turned off the flashlight, and both of them crouched behind a crate. "They followed us," Jack whispered, gripping one of the dynamite sticks tightly. In the corner of the depot, one of the creatures slithered under the fence. moving with unnerving precision in the dark. Emily covered her mouth to keep from screaming, while Jack prepared the fuse. The creature sniffed the air, searching for them. "If it finds us, throw it and run," Jack murmured, pointing to the dynamite. As the creature drew closer, a nearby floodlight suddenly flickered on with a loud buzz. The creature shrieked and quickly retreated into the shadows. "Let's get out of here before more show up," Emily said, pulling Jack as he packed the explosives into a backpack. The return to the mine. When they arrived back at the property, the area around the mine was eerily silent. The field seemed empty, but Jack and Emily knew the creatures were there, hidden in the darkness, watching. "We need to do this fast," Jack said, grabbing the dynamite and gasoline from the trunk. They cautiously approached the mine's entrance, lighting their way with flashlights. The makeshift barricade was still intact, but deep scratches and claw marks revealed the creature's attempts to break through. "They won't wait forever," Emily whispered, glancing around nervously. Jack began positioning the dynamite sticks around the entrance, while Emily poured gasoline over the rocks and soil. The plan was straightforward: create a massive explosion to cause a collapse and seal the mine for good. As they worked, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from deep within the tunnel. The air grew colder, and a foul stench filled the field. "They're coming," Emily said, lighting a flare and holding it firmly. Jack lit the fuse and shouted, "Run!" The two sprinted toward the car, but before they could reach it, the alpha creature emerged from the mine, followed by others. It charged forward, ignoring the fire and light, its empty eyes fixed on Jack. Emily threw the flare at the creature, causing it to hesitate for a moment before continuing its advance. The fuse was nearly burned out. "Get in the car," Jack shouted, but Emily stood her ground, staring down the creature with fierce determination. The motel rest. The two stopped at a small roadside motel to rest. While Emily prepared to take a shower, Jack began studying the regional map again, searching for reassurance that they were far enough away. He traced the route they had taken, but something made him uneasy. Old markings on the map indicated that the mine was part of a network of underground tunnels that could extend far beyond the property. Emily stepped out of the bathroom, immediately noticing the worried look on Jack's face. "What now?" she asked, her voice tense. Jack pointed to the map. "It wasn't just a mine. These tunnels connect to other areas. It's impossible to know where they might lead." The final warning. As they tried to sleep, Emily woke suddenly, sensing something strange in the air. A muffled, almost imperceptible sound came from outside the room. She peered out the window, but everything looked normal. Still, the sound continued, like something scratching the surface of the asphalt. "Jack, wake up," she whispered, shaking him. He groggily opened his eyes, but quickly sat upright upon hearing the sound. Grabbing a flashlight and a knife, Jack opened the room's door, with Emily close behind. The motel parking lot was empty, but there were fresh marks on the ground, deep scratches leading directly to their car. "They're here," Emily said, her voice barely audible. Jack shone the flashlight around, but he couldn't see anything. The sound, however, grew louder, now coming from the field behind the motel. "They followed us back. This will never end," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Before they could retreat inside, a distant scream pierced the air, coming from somewhere down the road. Jack quickly shut the door and locked it. "We need to think. We can't keep running, but we can't face them head-on either." One last plan. Back in the room, Jack and Emily began gathering whatever they had at their disposal. "They're attracted to sound and scent," Jack said, recalling what had happened at the property. "If we can lure them somewhere, maybe we can trap them for good." Emily shook her head, exhaustion evident in her face. "But where? And how? They always seem to find a way out." Jack pointed to the map again, this time to a marked location, an abandoned quarry about 20 kilometers away. It's deep enough. If we can lure them there, we can cause another collapse. Maybe this time, we can really bury them. Emily hesitated, but she knew they had no other choice. What if it doesn't work? Jack took a deep breath. Then we fight to the end. The plan in action. The night was heavy as Jack and Emily left the motel, their car loaded with flares, flashlights, and the remaining explosives they had taken from the depot. The abandoned quarry was in a remote area, surrounded by high cliffs and a narrow entrance leading to a deep abyss. If we can get them here, we have a chance, Jack said, trying to sound confident. Emily stayed silent, holding a lit flare while staring at the map on the dashboard. How are we going to lure them? She asked. Jack pointed to the voice recorder he had left running in the car. We'll leave the sound of the engine and the recorder near the entrance. They'll follow the noise. At the quarry. When they arrived at the quarry, Jack parked the car in a strategic spot, turned on the headlights to light the path, and placed the recorder in a visible location. Emily prepared the explosives near the edge of the cliff. Let's do this quickly, Jack said. Once they're inside, we won't have much time. The hunt. The sound of the recorder echoed across the area, playing loud, distorted noises. Jack and Emily hid behind a pile of rocks, watching as the silence of the night was shattered by distant screams. The creatures were coming. One by one, shadows began to appear at the quarry entrance, moving cautiously but drawn to the sound. Their deformed bodies glimmered under the headlights, and their clumsy movements seemed almost coordinated. At the center of the group, the alpha creature led the way, its grotesque jaw wide open in a scream that made the ground tremble. Emily held her breath as the creatures approached the recorder, circling the parked car. Jack whispered, "Wait, closer, just a few more." When the alpha creature crossed the blast point, Jack lit the fuse. "Now," he shouted, pulling Emily as they ran away from the area. The final collapse. The explosion was deafening. A wave of light and fire lit up the sky as the quarry floor collapsed, swallowing the creatures. Agonized screams echoed through the air, but were soon drowned out by the sound of falling rocks sealing the abyss. Jack and Emily collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, watching the dust cloud rise into the sky. For a moment, everything was silent. No shadows moved. No sounds came from the quarry. Did we do it? Emily asked, her voice hesitant. Jack nodded, exhausted. But then, from deep within the abyss, one final scream echoed, long, guttural, and filled with rage. The alpha creature hadn't been completely destroyed, but its cry grew fainter and fainter until it disappeared into the darkness. Jack and Emily knew it was trapped, but for how long? A new day. When the sun rose, the couple was still sitting at the edge of the quarry, staring at the site of the collapse. The morning's tranquility felt surreal, but the weight of what they had faced still hung over them. "I think we did everything we could," Jack said, holding Emily's hand. Emily looked out at the horizon, her eyes filled with worry. They were trapped before and survived. What makes us think this will stop them for good? Jack didn't have an answer. He only knew that, for now, the world was safe. They got into the car and began driving away from the quarry, never looking back. The recorder, forgotten on the ground, picked up only the sound of the wind and rolling stones. But in the distance, a faint and almost imperceptible sound began to emerge once more. The echo of claws scratching against rock, persistent and relentless.